The film we are watching tonight is not silent. It comes with a beautiful background score, which was composed by the world-renowned sitar player and composer Anupma Shanker, which was commissioned in 2017 as part of the film's digital restoration by the BFI. And of course, the highlight of this evening is our own live sitar and tabla performance. And I will introduce the two extremely talented musicians in just a bit. One of the reasons I chose this film and why this screening I think is extremely rare and special is because Shiraz, A Romance of India, is today one of the only few, I suppose a handful of silent films from India to have survived, which is really tragic for a country which has one of the oldest and richest film traditions going back to 1896. And so in programming the film, it is my hope that this gives us a chance to celebrate this rare gem of not just South Asian film history, but also of world cinema. So a little bit about the film and how the project came together. Described as a silent spectacle, which we'll see is very accurate. And it has an all-Indian cast of thousands. In fact, I found some statistics in a 1928 article which says it has 50,000 extras. There are 300 camels, 7 elephants, and the entire standing army of the princely state of Jaipur at the time. So there's some mind-blowing numbers there. And the most lavish costumes and, of course, stunning outdoor settings. And so from the very first shot, Shiraz, A Romance of India seems to be driven by, I'd say, an artistic integrity, authenticity, and production scale, which is really unmatched and unfamiliar for its time. This is 1928. And I think this really begs to draw our attention to its creators, because there's more than one. And the coming together of their individual visions and ambitions to create this epic film. It is officially described as a British, German, and Indian co-production, but it's very clear that the creative impulse and the artistic vision came from 2 of its Indian co-creators. The first one is the star and producer of the film, Himanshu Rai, who's a true pioneer of early Indian cinema. He was also the founder of one of the first world-class film studios called Bombay Talkies, which he established in 1934 in Mumbai, today's Mumbai, then Bombay, with his wife, the star and actress Devika Rani. And the second key figure is Niranjan Pal, who sadly has become one of the least recognized, I'd say, figure of Hindi cinema, but he was and remains one of the most gifted storytellers of early Indian cinema, in fact, key to the birthing of screenwriting. And the story of how these 2 men met is also, I would say, a key episode of Indian film history. So in the early 1900s, Niranjan Pal was shipped away to London with his father, who was a famous freedom fighter against the British rule. And this was to keep him from getting in trouble with British authorities in India for his own involvement in the freedom struggle. And while he was in London, he found his calling in stage writing. So in 1922, Niranjan Pal wrote and produced a play called The Goddess, which had an all-Indian cast. And it was extremely successful, in fact, so successful that it ran for 66 consecutive performances in some of the key theaters in London. And I think it's such an extraordinary story and really inspiring, which not many of us know about. And it's very foundational to early Indian cinema. Also, as luck would have it, and talk about stars being aligned, the man who played the lead role in this play was this young Indian solicitor, Himanshu Rai, who was trained as a lawyer in Calcutta and then in London, but he was very passionate about theater, and he had been directing theater in Calcutta in his university days and was really committed to reviving Indian dramatic traditions and performing arts. So the year is 1924. At the time when these 2 met, Himanshu Rai is really consumed with the idea of setting up a film studio in Bombay under British India. And he was reaching out to established film companies in Europe to bring this dream to fruition. And this brings us to the British and German side of the co-production. So in 1924, Himanshu Rai travels to Germany with a number of film proposals, which he designed to appeal to both Indian and Western audiences. And in Germany, he was able to strike a successful partnership deal with a Munich-based film company called Emelka Studios, which was headed by 2 German brothers, Franz Osten and Peter Ostermeyer. So these two brothers were sort of also pioneers in their own way, because Peter Ostermeyer established Emelka Studios in 1919, which is still functional to this day. It's called Bavaria Studios, and it is today one of Europe's leading state-of-the-art film and television studios. So 105 years later, his legacy still lives on. And as to why these two German brothers were so interested in Himanshu Rai's proposals, which were actually quite rooted in Indian/Oriental mythology and culture, one needs to take a look at the 1920s Germany. So this is Germany in the aftermath of the First World War and following the Treaty of Versailles, undergoing a tremendous amount of social, cultural, and economic turmoil. And there was sort of like an intellectual and spiritual churning amongst the intelligentsia, with a lot of writers, authors, and playwrights and filmmakers moving away from the Western themes and exploring world cultures, especially the Orient and the East. To just take two examples, so in 1918, the German female novelist Thea von Harbou, who was actually Fritz Lang's wife, and she is in fact the screenwriter of his career-defining sci-fi film Metropolis. She published a novel called Das Indische Grabmal, in German, which translates to the Indian Tomb. And this was then made into two films by the Austrian director Joe Mai, which was released all over Austria and Germany. Then in 1922, German novelist Hermann Hesse published his very influential novel Siddhartha, which was on the life of Buddha. And because the book was in German, suddenly Buddhism became widely accessible to the German public. So these are just two examples of, but they give us a sense of the zeitgeist, so to say, and why Franz and Ostermeyer saw this kind of opportunity in partnering with Himanshu Rai and his proposals, because his proposals really echoed the wider German sentiment and fascination with this romanticized East. So the deal was signed, and it was agreed that the Germans were going to make 3 films with Himanshu Rai's company, the Great Eastern Film Corporation. And the Germans were going to provide all the equipment, the camera crew, and the director, Franz Ostermeyer, who came to be known as Franz Osten. And the Indians were going to bring the artists, the scripts, the locations, and all the finances. After this deal is signed, then the third key partner of this project, the British company called BIF, the British Instructional Film, came on board, and they were very interested. They were a documentary making company actually until this time, but they saw an opportunity to really expand into South Asia. There was, of course, a natural curiosity among the British public about India being an exotic and oriental location. And so they wanted to seize the opportunity, and so they also signed the deal. So that's like the production side of the film. About the film itself, so it was made in 1928, and Shiraz, The Romance of India, is one of 3 silent films, which are now popularly known as the Austen-Rai trilogy. The first one was made in 1926. It's called The Light of Asia, also a very well-known title, which was based on the life of Buddha. And in fact, that is the first ever Indo-German film production in the world. And the third one is called A Throw of Dice, which was made, it's the final film, is made in 1929. However, in terms of the appeal and the overall sort of like charm, it's fair to say that Shiraz, The Romance of India, really stands out. And the film is of course also one of the most, I would say, out of the 3 films, it is the most critically and commercially successful. It worked really well in India and abroad, especially in Germany. It was really well received by the public and the critics. The film is a fictional retelling of the construction of the Taj Mahal, the architectural marvel of the Mughal era, which was built by the 17th century Emperor Shah Jahan in memory of his deceased empress, Mumtaz Mahal. However, the film does not really stick to historical facts. It deviates quite a bit. And so what we see in the film is it's a fictional weaving of unrequited love. And there are all these kind of like themes, subplots and sub-themes, twist of fate, self-sacrifice. And this is done through largely, I would say, fictional characters and situations. In fact, Shiraz, the lead character of the film, which is played by Himanshu Rai, is an entirely fictional creation. And this is based in the name Shiraz is derived from the city of Shiraz in Iran, which is known for its Persian poetry and literature. So I think it's an homage to the Indo-Islamic theme of the film. Also, the empress in whose memory the Taj Mahal was created is, her real name was Arjuban Banu Begum, and she was then called, it was a regnal title which was given to her as Mumtaz Mahal. But in the film, she's called Salima. So there are some cinematic liberties in the film. A few words about the location, which is really the talking point of the film. So you're going to see some of the grandest and the most magnificent royal palaces from India, palaces, gardens, in the outdoor and indoor scenes. And the credit for getting these permissions, which was a very difficult task, goes to Himanshu Rai, because this is a time when India still had princely state. So the palaces of Jaipur were inhabited by the Maharaja of Jaipur. And so he somehow managed to not just secure the permissions for filming inside the palaces and the gardens, but somehow he also got the permissions for the Maharaja to give him all the royal jewelry and costumes, and of course his whole standing army and all the animals which appear as extras in the film. I mean, the team of technicians, it goes without saying that that Himanshu Rai put together for this project speaks a great deal to his own sort of like personal genius and his multiple talents as a star, producer, visionary. But I think it's also a glowing example of one of cinema's first true international collaborations, which has been delivered with great technical expertise and artistic coherence, despite having three different producers with three different perspectives. One technician, I know we are running out of time, but one technician that really deserves a mention is Franz Osten, who, of course, was the helm of Shiraz because he was the film director, but he went on to become the first European retainer of Bombay Talkies, which was Himanshu Rai's film studio. And he shot 16 feature films under that banner, which include some of the biggest Hindi blockbusters of early Indian cinema, including two films, Achut Kanya and Jeevan Naya, which really launched the careers of the earliest superstars of Hindi cinema. And it is, I think, fair to say that with Himanshu Rai and Niranjan Pal, Osten is a foundational figure of Hindi cinema. In fact, there's a beautiful essay that film historian Gautam Chintamani wrote for the DVD booklet for the BFI, which was titled Himanshu Rai and the Invention of Hindi Film, and where he calls him one of the first film orientalist, but also literally crediting him with inventing the blueprints of the early Hindi dramas of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so for a man who did not speak a word of Hindi, I think this is an incredible cinematic legacy, but it also perhaps speaks to the fact that cinema is its own language. Quickly about the casting, of course, Himanshu Rai plays the lead role of Shiraz, but I wanted to say something about the female parts, which does not get talked about in this film. In the early 1900s, but also up to 1920s when the films were getting made, it was near impossible for directors in Indian cinema to cast women for female roles. So you typically see men dressed in women playing all the female parts because cinema was considered not a very honorable profession. So women did not want to work. However, as a sharp contrast, what we see in Shiraz and the other two films of the trilogy, but also of the subsequent films under Bombay Talkies, there are some truly remarkable and really, I would say, talented actresses that show up in these scenes. In fact, just an example, the role of Salima is played by a woman, theatre actress named Enakashi Ramarao. And she was a doctorate in philosophy in the 1920s, highly educated woman. Another fascinating character in the film is Dahlia, who's this plotting vamp trying to compete for the prince's love. And she was played by an Anglo-Indian actress, Renee Smith, who appears as Sita Devi. That was her screen name. She, in fact, was in all three films of the trilogy, and she played the leading role in the first one and had become a huge star by this time. And I think it says something about the team that Himanshu Rai had assembled. I think there was a collective progressive mindset that reflects in these women that were working in these early films. And I think, speaking of progressive, there's also something else I should mention. There's an intimate scene in the film. I say intimate strictly by 1920s standards. So, and it created a lot of buzz when the film was premiered in 2017 at the London Film Festival. And I heard that Anupma Shanker was very shocked. It's an on-screen kissing scene, which was really unheard of in those days. Maybe it's one of the first kisses on the screen. I don't know about that. But I'm not going to say when and where it appears, but perhaps we can all sort of like stumble upon it and see how we feel about, do we still get shocked in 2024? So that's pretty much what I can say about the film. I'll just conclude with, I found this wonderful review from 1920, the film's earliest review actually, which is dated October 7th, 1928. It appears in the New York Times. This is when the film was released in the United States. So just to give us a sense of how it was received, and this is written by someone named John McCormack, and this is what they said in the United States in 28. Shiraz is the best film that has so far come out of India, and it will appeal for its romantic and moving story, its great pictorial and poetic beauty, and the rich strangeness of the Eastern pageantry, which it unfolds before our eyes. And he goes on to say, the story is alive with barbaric life and color, which I think is the ultimate compliment for a black and white film, to call it a color film, yeah. So 96 years later, as we're watching this film tonight, I hope that we share some of that awe and excitement. But most of all, I hope that we remember some of these unsung heroes, these dreamers, visionaries, and pioneers, and their rich, so almost forgotten, but not quite, this Indo-European heritage, without which we can all agree that both Indian and world cinema will not be the same today. So I hope you enjoy the film, and thank you for your time.